All right, let's talk about how to write a novel. This is your complete proven guide. So I know what you're thinking. You've seen this movie before, right? The guy tries to write a novel. It takes him 40 years. He's eking it out. He's miserable. He's smoking 1,000,000 cigarettes and living on whiskey, and he can't get it done. Eventually he burns it, or it comes out after his death, and it's just this tragedy. No, that doesn't have to be you. If you want to write a novel, but you don't know where to start, or you just prefer that it not take you 10 years, I understand. I also understand you definitely don't want to end the decade with 9 novel openings and 0 full drafts, right? So how do you do it, and how do you make sure it's good? And how do you maybe even do it so that you're done before the next decade of your life? Maybe you know how to write a short story or essay. Maybe you could do that in your sleep, but a novel is a different beast. Okay, well, having written and published 3 novels myself, in this video, I'm going to break down the full process of writing a novel into 7 steps, okay? So let's go. When I first wanted to write a novel, this was in 2012, I didn't know what to do. So I Googled how many words are in a novel, and the internet told me it was 70,000. So I just wrote until I hit 70,000 words. Like, that was my approach to writing a novel. So no wonder it took me 6 years after that to shape it up and sell it, right? I rewrote it maybe 12 or 13 times over those 6 years. I rewrote it a lot. But over those years that I was reworking it, I actually figured out how to write a novel beyond just hit 70,000 words. And that's what this video is on today. So step number 1 is to know why you're writing. And when I work with writers, I like to start with asking them, what is the big question at the heart of your book that you want to explore? Every powerful story has a big question at the heart of it. This is a human question. It's deep, it's often thorny, it's difficult to answer, and it's emotional. It makes us feel something. We care about it. As an example, how do we overcome trauma? That's the kind of big question that could be the foundation of a really powerful story. Another example is, do we follow desire or responsibility to live a better life when they clash? What question do you want to spend the next 4 to 10 months of your life exploring, whether it's through fiction or nonfiction? This applies to both. My big question for when you read this, my first novel, was, how do we make meaning out of an unlived life when we're at the end of it? How do we look back and find meaning when we didn't do what we wanted to do? That was a really scary question to me, and it was something I wanted to explore through fiction. So pick your big question. It doesn't have to be scary to you, but it does have to be interesting, and you have to care about it. Step 2 is to ask, does your novel idea tee up this question? Right? So like, your plot line, your book premise, your characters should set up your big question. I just told you my big question at the heart of my first novel when you read this was, how do we make meaning out of an unlived life when we're at the end of it? Well, my main character, when the novel opens, she has just gotten a terminal diagnosis at the age of 33. She's very young. She learns that she has 6 months to live, and she hasn't done the things that she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to start a bakery. She hasn't started a bakery yet. She had big plans for that. She wanted to have a family. She doesn't have a family yet. And so she's facing this crisis of realizing this whole time she thought her life hadn't started yet, and it turns out that was her life. And how was she going to make sense of that? So that plot, that plot point, now I didn't tell you the whole plot of the novel. I didn't know what the whole plot of the novel was yet, but I had that premise, and that premise teed up my big question. So find a kind of premise, a character, and by that I mean a character in a particular situation that is going to tee up that question that you care about and that you want to explore. If it's nonfiction you're writing, that would be you, right? In your past, like, what happened to you that teed up this question for you? Step 3 is to choose a novel that you love as a spirit guide. So this novel that you love is going to be your touchstone book, the book that you'll come back to whenever you feel stumped about how to structure your opening, or how long a chapter should be, or what should be included in a scene, or how to integrate backstory. These are challenging craft questions that we face when we're writing a novel. And having a book as a kind of spirit guide because you admire something about it and want to emulate that in your own writing is really helpful. You don't have to obviously copy this book's structure, and you wouldn't probably be able to do that even if you wanted to. But you can try. I mean, stealing structure is not a plagiarism risk. You're just getting, and it's not a problem either. There's nothing unethical about it. You're just taking what works for this other person and applying it to yourself. You can also just use it for inspiration. When I was writing, again, my first novel, when you read this, I used the novel Where'd You Go, Bernadette as my kind of spirit guide book. I knew that I wanted to tell the story, and when you read this, through emails. And I knew that she'd done that in that novel, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And so I basically charted out what she did in the first 20 to 30 pages of the book. This email is here and it does this. This email is here and it does this. So I could see, what does it look like to effectively tell a story through email? I didn't do that for the whole book, but I did it for maybe the first fourth or so of her book. And it just gave me some ideas of how to tell my own story through email. I didn't copy her structure exactly, but I sort of got a sense of her pacing, and that was super helpful in pacing my own story told through email. Before we get into the next 4 steps that you need to know, I just want to thank you for watching and tell you that before I had published my 3 novels with HarperCollins, I was a former lawyer trying to publish a novel that had taken me 6 years to write after dozens of false starts and scrap drafts. But one day, something finally clicked, and 3 books later, now I'm a published author and writing coach here to share with you what I learned along my journey so you can streamline your path to writing your dream book, saving you years of the trial and error I went through, hopefully. On my channel, you're going to learn how to actually get your book written, how to cross the finish line to becoming a professional writer, and how to do it joyfully, because writing doesn't have to be scary and painful. In fact, it can and should be fun most of the time. So let's make writing fun again and get your best book done together. Okay, so please like this video and subscribe to this channel because I have a lot more strategies that I am excited to share with you. And with that, let's get back to the video. Step 4 is, who are we going to follow in your story? You need to give them a want. Okay, so by who are we going to follow, I mean, your book has a protagonist. Every story has a protagonist. By protagonist, I mean the main person who we care about, whose journey we are following. That person is typically the person we meet in the opening of your story. There are exceptions, but 99% of the time that's the case. You want to give this character an unsatisfied want at the beginning of your story. And by unsatisfied, I mean a want that cannot be easily filled. It doesn't have to be a want that's profound and deep and is going to take them the full novel to find. It doesn't have to be the love of a father who left when they were a child. I mean, it could be, but it doesn't have to be something that heavy. It could be a glass of water. It could be something small, but it needs to be hard to get. It can't be a glass of water if all they need to do to get it is stand up and walk across the room. It could be a glass of water if they are stuck on the highway in traffic and they've been, in this gridlock and unmoving for 45 minutes and the AC has gone out and they just are so parched, right? Like, it could be a glass of water if someone has a broken leg and their crutches are across the room and they can't go get it. Like, it just needs to be difficult for them to get. They can get it by chapter 2. They can get it by page 10. They also don't have to not access this thing for your entire book. But having a character have a want that hasn't been satisfied at the opening of your story is just a great hook to engage the reader and to get them invested in the story before they've gotten to know your character enough to care about them. Once they've gotten to know them enough to care about them, this want becomes less important, but at the beginning, it's just a really useful tool. Step 5 is to start writing, right? You have your big question, you have your premise, you have your character with their unsatisfied want, and you have your book as your spirit guide. Now it's time to start writing. And as you write, you are going to follow the tension, okay? What I mean by this is you're going to create tension and you're going to follow it with your big question as your guide. If you're trying to decide, oh, what should happen next? I could go this direction or that direction. I could write this scene or that scene. Ask yourself, which of these enhances the tension And that's probably the direction you want to go. When I'm writing a story, I let this carry me at least halfway through it. Now, at some point, at the midway point, maybe about halfway through, I may stop at that point and create an outline for the second half of my book. But until then, I don't need one yet, and I don't use one. I find it a little bit too confining. So I will follow the tension up until about that point. Step 6 is to make a plan to finish. Now, this is a process step. We've been talking more craft. This is a process step, but it's an important one. You want to make a plan to finish so that you actually finish. This is the idea that, when we set concrete goals, we're much more likely to reach them than when we set vague, kind of amorphous goals. When do you write? For how long? How many words? Do some research into your own process. Observe how you work so that you can project when you can be done, and then set a realistic goal date for yourself. So if you only write on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 2 hours each day, because that's what you have, great. That's good. That's 4 hours a week. About how much do you write on those days? Figure out what that is. Maybe it's 3,000 words a week. Okay, so if a novel is 70,000 words, which is a good target, figure out how many weeks it will take you to get there and set your goal date. Whether your goal date is 2 months away or 8 months away, it doesn't matter. We all are going to write at different paces based on many variables, from the story we're telling to what our schedules are. But the key is to set a concrete goal for yourself based on your own schedule and lifestyle. Finally, your last step is back to a craft step. I want you to let your characters suffer and surprise you. Okay? Sounds mean, but it's not. The best endings that I have written are when my characters write them. I let my characters write them. They get to decide how they want the book to end. But to get there, for the characters to be able to write the ending, they have to learn something. And to learn something, they have to suffer. It can be hard as a writer to let your characters suffer because you're probably a nice person, just like I am. And as compassionate humans, we don't like to watch people suffer. We actually like to help them, get out of suffering typically. But when you're writing fiction, you have to allow them to suffer. And once I became a parent, I actually thought that was a pretty good analogy. It's sort of like being a parent, which you can imagine even if you're not one. When it comes to your kids, there are things they need to learn for themselves, and they need to learn through struggle. You can't do everything for them. If you don't let them struggle, they won't learn. And that's the same for your characters. So in the previous step, when I talked about creating tension, you're creating tension and you're letting your characters sit in that, and you're letting them experience it and you're letting them struggle through it. And then your ending will write itself often if you've done that, because they will have learned something and they will tell you what that is. And those are the steps. Good luck. You can do it. Every published author has a first draft of their first book. We all start at the same beginning. Okay, if these steps were helpful to you and you're ready to write your book and you want to know more, know that as a 3-time published novelist and writing coach, I've put together a free training for you on how to write your dream book while holding down a full-time job or whatever you do in it. And I teach you the exact process I use to write my books. And all you have to do to get this free training is apply to my 12-month program, the Book Incubator. The application is just 2 questions. You can do it in under 5 minutes. There's no obligation to join the program, but if you're admitted, I'll send you that free training right away. And it's really good, I promise. You have nothing to lose, except maybe years of your life dreaming of writing this book that's burning inside you. So click below to apply and you'll get my free training that you can watch right away. It'll totally be worth your time.